Welcome to Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. We have had an incredible 2 weeks here as our software has been upgraded at Clubhouse. So we have a few glitches here and there, so please bear with us as we try to sort out all of these glitches on Clubhouse. We are coming back, the shows are picking up again, and we're back in town. We're very excited about today's topic, which is all about hiring great people. It's not an easy thing to do, hiring great people. Michelle, what do you think? Oh my gosh, I just moved her to the audience. Jeez. Invite as a speaker. There she is. I moved you to the audience instead of making you a moderator, Michelle. How does it
I
feel?
don't know. I didn't know what was happening, but I'm back in. I'm back in good
Yeah,
favors.
look, today is such an exciting episode. We're going to be talking about how to hire great people for your startup. I've been working on a book, as Michelle knows, for almost 10 years now. It's being published on October 3rd, 2023. It's a Forbes published book called Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. And we talk about story, people, money, and systems. And what's interesting is that the people are really the hardest part of the equation when it comes to a startup, and how to hire them and figure out which ones are great and which ones are not. Now, we've just been upgraded to this app and it's new, and so bear with us. We're going to have a few glitches here. But we should try to find our guest speaker. Michelle, if you can work on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm working on it. We're looking for Chris actually, and yeah, just keep going. Let's tee it up for him, Colin. In the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to let you know that we are a startup club. We're almost 1 million members. If you haven't already joined, please join our club. There's tremendous speakers. We've had on many authors, experts, serial entrepreneurs, um, unicorn entrepreneurs, billionaires. We've had on tremendous speakers on this particular show every Friday, 2 o'clock Eastern. And if you haven't already done so, check out startup.club. We have a whole set of shows that we run, of recordings that we have on startup.club. And I often say that if you actually go back and listen to all of these episodes, you'd have an MBA in entrepreneurship. So that's what we've got on startup.club. But you can also sign up to the email list. The email list is at www.startup.club, and you can sign up to that email list. And it's a way of being informed of what goes on at Startup Club, because the app doesn't make it that simple to really find out who's coming on, which authors are coming on, and what's actually happening on the club. But if you sign up to that email list, you can be much more in the you know you can be much more aware of what's going on. And we really do have some phenomenal speakers, and we've had in the past, and we will continue to bring on phenomenal speakers once we work out these bugs, of course, with the new platform. And again, we apologize if there's any issues with you getting to finding this club or the show, because it really is a new platform and we're all trying to figure it out right now. It's almost like starting all over again where we were a year or two ago. People are the number one challenge that we have when it comes to finding a startup. We've got an incubator here, and we got a gentleman named Kyle who runs the incubator, and he's amazing. What did it take for us to find him? It took a lot. In your companies, what does it take to find the right people? If you're in the audience and you think this topic is of interest, please feel free to share the room. I'm going to do that right now. Right at the very bottom of the room there, we have a share button. So if you go, the first left is the chat, and the second left is the share on Clubhouse. And if everyone in the room would share this, I think this is of value. This is a topic that's of value for everyone, to learn how to hire great people. Michelle, I just saw Chris come on. I hope you're working on that.
Yeah, I was just on the phone with Chris, and he should be in
I
now.
just saw him pop into the, there he is. He's a
Yeah, the
newbie.
app
All right, so
is
I'm going to invite him. I'm going to invite him to speak.
okay. Perfect.
So we often bring in, new speakers, new authors, new entrepreneurs, leaders, and they have their party hat on. So bear with us again. Like Chris, you're down in the audience there. I can see you.
He's
There
there
he
with
is.
us right now. At
So,
last, Chris, you
Chris, how you doing?
persevered. Thank you.
So, Chris, you can talk by taking your mute off in the lower right-hand corner. You can click on that unmute, and then when you don't speak, put it back on so we don't have background noise.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Wonderful. Apologize. It is admittedly the first time using the app, and I didn't give myself enough time before clicking in. So I'm
Well,
glad. Better late than never, hopefully.
no, and you're in good company because the app just upgraded about 2 weeks ago, and it's caused a mess on the app in so many different ways. But we're all trying to learn it, and we're all trying to figure it out, and we're trying to solve the glitches. But today's all about learning about how to hire great people. And this is the Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. This is episode, I think, number 105. If you're listening to this in podcast, you may not know this, but like Chris, you can come on stage and ask questions and interact with the speakers by coming to our show every Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern. So if you're listening to this in podcast, consider joining us. We really do enjoy people coming on stage. If you're in the audience, we'd love for you to share the room. Again, that's that icon second from the left. I think this is a topic that every startup has challenges with. We all face issues hiring great people. And I also have a bit of a story here because Chris, I don't know when you joined Top Grading.
Colin, you may have been in diapers when I joined Topgrading.
Okay, what are you talking about? I was there. I'm an EO. I've been an EO for 25 years.
hmm
And I saw a session on top grading back in about the year 2000. I think we're going back, or maybe 2002, 2003, or something like that. And I was absolutely blown away. Now, let me be clear here. I went to your session, I listened to your ideas, and we brought them back to the company. We've run about a dozen companies since then, and we continue to deploy a number of your methods and your ideology. I think everybody here is very excited about this topic. I mean, it is one of the most difficult challenges, especially for startups. Can you just kick it off and tell us what is top grading? Like, tell us a little bit about that philosophy.
You bet. And excuse me. And actually, Colin, starting out talking about Topgrading as a philosophy is the right place to start because it really does start with the philosophy starts with the idea of a player. And when you say a player, a lot of people use the phrase, and a lot of people have different ideas of what an A player is. And for us, an A player is really two things: a high performer who fits your culture really well. Someone who you like working with, who is a good team member. And so those two things, those are both necessary to be an A player. So top grading really starts with one, defining what that is, kind of role by role in the organization, and two, yet really setting the A player standard. Saying, hey, we expect high performance, and we expect our team members to exhibit our core values and be a good culture fit. And then kind of going down from there. Top grading, the philosophy is setting the goal of filling every position in the company with an A player. And then we think about, all right, so how are we getting the A players in? And very often, especially when you're talking startup, it's hiring. And so top grading is also setting the goal of hiring at least 90% A players. So that's the philosophy. It's really just setting our expectations, setting a goal, and then actually measuring our hiring results. One thing that is very seldom done.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle, I mean, we've run a number of companies here in the incubator, and we have a lot of challenges. And I'm just curious from your perspective, what some of those challenges you face and how you've been able to hire great people, but also in regards to top grading. I'm asking two questions at once. All right, I'm going to pass it to you, Michelle, before I go for the next
Yeah,
one.
yeah, no problem. Actually, I was going to share a little story, Colin. I don't know if you remember, but when you and Jeff hired me, you used the whole top grading methodology. And I just want to share that with the team a little bit. It was the first time I was exposed to top grading at that level. And what do I mean by that? So what happened is even during the interviews, I was very aware of the expectations of the job. In fact, it was even included in my offer letter in detail. And I'm telling everybody in a quantifiable method, qualitative, obviously, but quantifiable, meaning it said, you will meet these goals. And in my case, I was leading all the distribution efforts for .club domains. You will bring on X amount of new partners, distribution partners, etc. It was my first time being exposed to it. I thought it was a fantastic method, and being the I guess kind of semi type A personality I am, like I really like took it very seriously, and I had a very engaged conversation with you and Jeff specifically about those metrics. I found it very empowering, Colin, and I think it's a great way. And I'm very curious from Chris, like even more methods and process to really suss out what is a good fit. Because sometimes a good fit is not necessarily, I'm going to say, what's on a person's resume, but that they're a good fit for the organization, and they will rise to the occasion. So I'm going to throw it back to Chris. Like I really get, like, we know exactly what we want. We know the performance and the metrics. But Chris, how do you get to that next level and really tap into someone's talent when they may have not quite done exactly what you're looking for, Chris?
Right. And so the yeah, it boils down to executing a good top grading interview. And so, for those of you who aren't familiar with top grading, the top grading interview is chronological, in depth, and structured. And another acronym or adjective to put in there is compartmentalized. And so, the idea is not a new one. However, the execution, in depth and structured and compartmentalized, those tend to fall off. There's often a resume review. What we want to get to is get beyond the bullet points on the resume and understand the details. So we ask candidates about every job they've had in their entire career. And in fact, we actually asked them some questions about high school and college, if they went to college right after high school or whenever they went to college. And we talk about high points, low points, and people for every one of those jobs. And when we get into the jobs, we break those high points and low points questions into: what were your accomplishments? What were your mistakes? What did you like about that job? What did you dislike about that job? What was your manager like? What were their strong points and weaker points? If and when we talk to that manager, what do you think they'll tell us about your strengths and developmental areas at that time? And on a 5-point scale, with 1 being poor and 5 being perfect, how do you think they're going to rate your performance overall? And by asking those questions and not just getting one example, but getting multiple examples of accomplishments, and getting at least one example of a mistake they made or something they do differently looking back for every job they've had, what we get is we get a really rich data set. And we're able to then, at the end of that interview, rate that person on patterns of behavior. And so that chronological, in-depth, structured interview allows us to see, often dozens and dozens of patterns of behavior over time, whether they be, performance, or whether they be skills improving over time, or whether they're behaviors like resourcefulness and creativity and strong communication skills, those kind of competencies or behaviors. We see those patterns, and then we can more accurately rate what they're going to be like when you put them into your environment.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, can we break it down a little bit? It's pretty like, I like the way you're talking about this. I think you're like, this is really key. Now, how do we, like, what are some practical components of an interview that a startup would use based on your theories there? And I understand, like, it can go in totally, the gold standard here is learn the top grading method. Totally understand that. But can you give us some practical tips for that interview?
Well, and whatever, and it doesn't even matter what kind of interview you're doing. So we obviously strongly recommend, at least with your finalist candidates, slowing down just a bit and spending some more time with them. And so what does that mean? One is for let's say somebody who's pretty early in their career, 2 to 5 years of experience, that top grading interview will be roughly 90 minutes long. For someone who has been they got a bit longer career, they're at a higher level, maybe a leadership level, that interview could be 2 to 4 hours long, depending on how much career history they have. And in that time, that's the top grading interview. Even for your screening interviews, phone interview about core values, core value questions. One thing that most interviewers don't do well is they don't get down to specifics. So they accept that first sort of high level answer. For example, what was one of your accomplishments in that job? And the answer is, my projects all went pretty well. I actually delivered most of those projects on time and on budget. Many interviewers will move on to the next question. And the thing is, we didn't really learn much about that candidate. We don't know what kind of projects they worked on. We don't know how many projects they worked on at a time. We don't know if they were, solo projects, or if they were team projects, and if they were team projects, what part they played on the team, if they were leading it, or if they were just a member of the team. We don't know what challenges they faced, and we don't know about what those projects were. And so we need to get to specific examples. That's the punchline here. Get to specific examples. And when you get to a specific example, that then gives you the detail you need to ask some really good follow-up questions about how that person delivered it, the actual impact on the business, and who was involved and whose ideas were, whose idea it was, and who was the leader. So bottom line there is get to specifics and don't just accept the first level answer without probing a little bit deeper. And Colin, everyone can think of the acronym STAR, STAR. And some of you may have heard of this before. Put the S and the T together. That's the situation or task. A is action, and R is result. And so, to understand the answer, you need to understand the situation or task, what they were responsible for, what the goal was. If you don't know anything about the company, a little bit about the company and, the structure and, what was in good shape and what needed improvement. So that's the situation or task, giving some context. And then often when you ask that question, like, what were your accomplishments? Somebody may say, I exceeded quota by 20%. Well, that's actually the result. That's the R of that STAR acronym. And then we need to ask some probing questions to get to the A, so the action. What did you do to achieve the result in that situation? So just be thinking about the answers to the questions in that acronym, S, T, A, and R. Fill in each of those blanks and you'll have a solid answer, or you'll have some solid data that you'll better understand the candidate with.
Yeah, I totally get that. I know it's weird or whatever. Maybe it's different people's level of comfort. Sometimes you're interviewing people and it's literally you feel like you're reading off their resume. So, I like what you said about really digging into more of the process and the mechanics because it's easy for people to put an accomplishment, and it should be easy, hopefully, to like, oh, we lost him, to dig into the details of it. I think, Colin, that's something that's really absolutely critical. I know one thing that we have done here at our companies is, sometimes we ask people to come on and do a project. And I'm curious about what you think. Like, I feel like that's becoming more of a trend where you actually can step back and spend a little time with the person. Because what I like to say to people is it's just important for us to be a good fit for you, and vice versa, and for you to feel like you're a good fit for us. So, how would you? I'm just curious about your thoughts about doing projects and just like how to really get into that cultural fit aspect.
And Michelle, I'm going to apologize. Admittedly, my finger slipped. I was trying to hit mute or unmute, and I hit leave the room, and so I may have missed it, but I think I caught the last thing. And the question is, what do you think about as part of the vetting process, giving that person a project to do to really kind of be able to see them in action?
Yeah, being the whole thing for us is people, right? Is like a key success component here. And we get that you're technically whatever, capable, qualified, but what we often find is it's also the cultural meshing of things. So how would you suggest I yeah, threw out there one way we do is like give them a project, but I want to hear what your thoughts are on that.
So interesting, Michelle. A question or two about that, and one is, how long does the project take them? What's the time investment from the candidate's perspective on those projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something I'll say we would pay for, and it does
Ah,
vary. It does, yeah. We're not asking him to do things for free. It's something we might pay him for, and it could be anywhere from like a week to a month. Let's just say.
got it. Okay, and so I'm completely in favor of that as part of the vetting process. If the situation allows, if you are interviewing or if you're mainly recruiting people who are currently employed right now and not necessarily out looking for a job, they're not, they're getting that next job is not urgent from their perspective, and you have some time to do that. And if that's not the case, if they might have two or three other offers out there, which A players do, uh, you could also do something maybe a little bit shorter. But regardless, that kind of an audition is is we strongly recommend it. I mean, we talk about that with our clients. It's like, what can you do? What kind of project can you give them? What kind of maybe presentation could they do on a little bit of a with a little bit of a shorter timeline that would indicate that they are good at doing what you need them to do on the job, or a major component of that. And well, I mean, a great thing with that longer project that you might pay them for is there needs to be some interaction, or if you can um, design in some interaction, you everyone gets a little more experience with them and kind of see them again, can see them in action, and you get a little better feel for the culture fit. And to Michelle, I mean, I'm going to keep going back to it, but it's because it's really powerful. Executing a great top grading interview and really understanding the situation the person was in, including the organization culture they were working in, understanding what shape that place was in when they got there, so it was good news and bad news, and then understanding what they did well and what they didn't do so well. And here comes in the culture fit piece of the top grading interview. You say, hey, what did you like about it, working at that company, and your role at that company, kind of doing that job and working in that company, and what are some of the things that you disliked? If they describe that company's culture similar to your culture, and they say, I really liked working in there, that was a great culture, it was energizing and motivating and whatnot, that's an indication of good culture fit. If they go on to describe the company's culture like your culture, and they say, you know what, that wasn't for me, it was too this or not enough that, indicates that there's not a great culture fit. And the thing is, you're not just that's not just one sample. You're asking that same question over and over about all the organizations they've worked in, and again, you can see the patterns. You get a rich data set there. So you get their perspective, you get them to describe cultures, you get their perspective on the cultures, and then if you can even add to that, then seeing them in action by doing a project, there's not much more you can do, other than saying, hey, we're going to bring you on, you're going to work with us for 90 days, and then we're going to determine if we're going to offer you a job or not. That's not feasible in most situations. And so, seeing them in action and understanding the cultures they worked in and what they liked and disliked about those cultures, saying to someone, here's how a lot of interviewers try to get a culture fit. And they say, hey, what kind of culture do you like working in? Or what kind of
Right.
culture do you work in best? If that candidate has any sense, or if they did any preparation and your core values are on your website, they're going to recite your core values. And that's going to be a great answer to you. And you're going to say, whoa, hey, that's great. They want to work in a culture that's just like ours. well, you don't know if that's true or not. You don't know if they've ever experienced a culture like that. And so we want to know what someone has really done and their reaction to those different variables in that situation. And that'll give us a much better indication of culture fit.
So let me
Awesome.
sort of give an example here. So for instance, are you good at sales? Yes, I'm good at sales. I delivered blah blah blah. Versus, can you describe a situation where you had to make a sales call and the call didn't go so well? I'm asking, those situational questions. Is that where you're going with this?
100% exactly. It goes back to get examples. So have you ever had a sales call not go the way you wished it would have gone? Okay, if your person has any sales experience, their answer has to be yes, because lots more sales calls go bad than go good for most salespeople. And so, they'll say yes, and they say, "All right, let's talk about an example. Like, thinking about the last couple of years, what is one of those sales calls? And then you drill down, so like all of those different variables, and you get some context. Because saying, "Hey, what do you like?" Just because someone says they like something doesn't mean they actually like it. We need to know what really happened and who that really happened with.
Well, that's great. We have Guillermo and Simple on stage. Thank you for coming up, Guillermo. I always have a problem with your name, but thank you for coming up again.
You call me G for short. That's easy. Don't hurt
What's
yourself.
that?
Call me G for short. I don't want to hurt you. I
G.
don't want
All
you to
right,
get hurt.
G. All right. Do you have a question for Chris, or a technique that you use for hiring people? And again, thank you for coming on stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. I mean, I think there's been a lot that's been said. That's really, really good tips. Um, I guess I'll start with kind of what we've done, and hopefully it'll help some of the people in the group now. So what we've actually done is in the world that we live in today, there's a lot of access to freelancers, more so than there was in the past, right? Especially pre-COVID. I think during COVID and post-COVID, it really accelerated the world of freelancers, gig, and pretty much a gig economy, thanks to websites like Fiverr and Upwork. I mean, I've actually went out and I was looking for a specific set of skills, pretty quickly, right? I didn't want to have to wait to go through, the interview process and recruiting and all that. I needed it done right away. So I went on one of these websites that are famous for freelancers, and I actually found someone that had the skills that we needed for the job that we needed done. We hired them for the project, and we ended up liking them so much and the work that they did, we offered them a full-time position, right? So I think that's a way to fill in a role. If you're pressed for time, obviously you've got to still do your due diligence, make sure that they're the right fit. And I think that the work that they perform speaks volumes, right? So you'll be able to really get a good idea of what kind of employee this person may be in the future if you do decide to extend an offer to work for you directly. And then also, I think I was just kind of scrolling through the chat here. I think Robin had a question, and I think it's a pretty good question I want to bring up. It's, as a startup, when is a good indicator? When would you know to hire, your very first employee as a startup, right? You're a founder, you're getting your feet wet, and then you're getting close, and you're wondering, hey, when should I hire my first staff? And I'm curious to listen to what the panel has to say on this, if you guys don't mind.
Sure. And GM, I'm happy to take a first crack at that. And it's actually some advice I gave to they're a bit beyond startup. They're into profitable revenue phase after a couple of years. And his question was, all right, so it's the founder asking the question. He said, when do I need to hire a CEO? And I said, when you begin doing too many things, one, you're not very good at, or two, you really dislike doing. And so I know that's not a real sort of hard answer, like, at this point, when it gets to X, that's the point that you hire. But, thinking about what are you spending your time doing and what are you really good at? Are you spending most of your time doing what you're really good at? Whether you like it or not, if you're really good at it, you're probably the right person to be doing that, especially in the early stages. Are you spending most of your time doing what you're really good at? Or are you spending most of your time on what you're not so good at? For a lot of founders, they got into the business because they love something and they're really good at something. And when they begin running the business, they spend more time on things like administration and reporting and accounting and whatnot. And so thinking about that, where am I spending my time, and what percentage of my time is spent where I'm getting the most return on that investment. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, I often talk about personality profiles and identifying your own personality profile. There's different systems out there like the DISC method and Myers-Briggs and others. And by identifying your personality profile, you can recognize what you're good at and maybe what you're not so good at. I'm not so good at sales. I'll be quite frank. I don't like rejection. I'm a little too impatient for the whole process of sales. So I often, when I start a company, I find somebody who would partner with me or work for me who has that sales experience. So I would say that in order for a formula to work for a startup, identify your personality profile first and then figure out who you need to connect with you to be successful at your startup. And that's really the first step of doing this. Chris, I want to come back to top grading a little bit here and ask you a question. I know that when we've done a lot of contracts, we often put in, like, we're often pretty specific about the asks in that contract. We talk about, okay, in the next 90 days, let's say we're hiring a salesperson. In the next 90 days, you're going to deliver 100 leads and 12 meetings and 4 contracts, and you're very specific and measurable. I call them SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, and whatever R&T. But I was just curious, from your perspective, how important it is to have those goals set up right up front, because often I see people just panicking early on and bailing out before they even sign that, or even accept the offer letter. And I'm just curious from your perspective.
Con, the short answer is it's very important. And I would say it's very important to have those goals, or another way to look at that is, what results do you expect this person to deliver in their first 30, 60, 90 days, the first 4 quarters, and especially sort of fast forwarding out to that 1 year mark. So thinking about that person's 1 year anniversary, I'm sitting down to give them their 1 year performance appraisal, and if I am excited about having them on the team. If I would enthusiastically rehire this person if I had the decision to make again, what results would they need to deliver? And listing those things. So you're thinking about those results before you even start interacting with applicants and with candidates, and then it's very valuable in the hiring process, because those results and those specific measurable goals that you have for that person will also help you formulate your follow-up questions as you're interviewing. So we call it, and I don't think I've even mentioned this yet, we define that we call it a job scorecard. And so, it's literal. We score that when we're interviewing. We're predicting if someone can deliver those results, and we're rating them on the different behaviors we're interested in. And then that job scorecard becomes the onboarding document. So just as Michelle, you said, before you signed, you literally knew what you were signing up for. And then it's also the performance appraisal. Everyone, in working with new clients, getting on the call, and we tend to do sort of a review and assessment of everything they're doing right now. I can't think of one time in the last 23 years that I have seen a job description match whatever the content is for onboarding, match the performance appraisal. Those tend to be three different things. And one, it makes it much more challenging to manage performance. It makes it much more challenging for someone to be an A player. If they don't know exactly what you expect, it's really hard for them. If they don't know the target, it's really hard to hit it. And so, I mean, how important? It's critical to getting this right.
Isn't the worst interview the one where the interviewer spends most of the time talking? What percentage of time should the interviewer spend versus an interviewee? Like, what
Yeah,
is
let's
the
call
optimum amount of time?
20% or so.
So 20%. Sorry, the interviewer should speak no more than 20%. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, Colin. Yeah, and that's it's a directionally correct percentage. But what it says is the interviewer shouldn't be talking much other than to ask short questions. Asking a lot of short questions, but asking the question and giving the candidate the opportunity to respond. And I'll put a caveat on that, and kind of running into this with a couple of different clients right now. And one thing they're not doing enough of is actually selling the role. Now, Colin, I think you're referring to overselling, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are passionate about their business, really love talking about it, and they end up talking. They do most of the talking in the interview. And while there is a place for some of that selling, of course, especially with a very, with a talented candidate, you need to sell them. You need to convince them it's a good opportunity, but you also need to get to know them. So being thoughtful and strategic about when we're going to sell and what those selling points should be is very important. And in an interview, let's say you're interviewing someone for an hour, how much time should you spend selling? About 5% of the time, or maybe 8% of the time, about 5 minutes of that hour. The rest of the time is left for asking questions, asking the candidate questions, and then giving the candidate a little time at the end to ask some of their questions, because the best candidates will have some good questions for you, and they should.
And I think that's a little harder for startups because in your world, you deal with a lot of companies, bigger companies, and they have HR professionals who are trained at this. But startups, for the most part, we're so passionate about our project that we become the center of the interview instead of the interviewee. And it's just interesting that, like for startups, I think it's a little bit of a different challenge. And if we can acknowledge and recognize that we do need to be only 20% of the conversation, and we need to listen a lot more. And listening's not, again, is another challenge for startups. But if we listen a lot more, we can do a lot better. All right, we have Simple. You've been very patient on stage. Simple, do you have a story to share or a question for Chris?
Oh, thanks, Colin, for inviting me and all the moderators. Chris, I think I totally agree with a lot of things. If I would ask you a question, how can we actually probably screen a candidate for certain things like integrity or team player, work ethics, accountability, while we being startups, we can't pay like a corporate, and really we have our own kind of issues when it comes to the budgeting in our whole, but still we want people with integrity and good accountability. How do you handle this situation without diluting the very essence of a startup and still attract great talent?
Simple. The hit the compensation question. We can't necessarily afford to pay the same way that corporations can. And as Guillermo said, we hire people to maybe do projects, and so not necessarily buying the full person, or paying for the full person, but paying for some of their time is an answer. But also thinking about you and I don't know, Google or Apple or Amazon or whoever it may be, You don't necessarily need the same kind of a player those larger corporations do. The thing is, though, the market is the market. And if you do need someone who is at the same talent level as a mid-level leader at Google who is making $300,000 per year, if you need someone at that level, um, sorry to say, you probably have to figure out how to pay them accordingly. And you may get creative. Maybe it's giving them a little equity, whatever it may be. The thing is, though, to say, how can I attract someone who is accustomed to and is worth $300,000? And I know that's I'm purposely making that a pretty high number. How can I attract someone and convince them to come work with us? For 50% of that, the answer is you probably can't. There's everyone does a risk reward calculation in their head, and going from Google to a startup is risky. There needs to be some upside potential reward for them, and so unfortunately, there's not a real way around that. But in reality, um, this is a bit semantic, but in reality, you probably need a different kind of a player than Google does, and therefore that person shouldn't be as expensive. And your question about integrity and accountability, one, there are people with integrity and accountability at all different compensation levels. So then the question is, all right, so how do we find a find for that? And actually, simply, you said, you put it very interestingly. You said, how can we screen for integrity and team player and such? And frankly, you cannot screen for that. And when I think about screening, that's that upfront. It's what we do upfront. It's the short phone interview. It's looking at their resume. For us, we have a little piece of software we call it the pre-screen snapshot that helps do some screening. Early on, that screening is just that. You're looking for certain kinds of experience. Do they maybe have the technical skills? Do they have long enough job tenure, or are they a job hopper? Some of those more sort of black and white factual things. When we get deeper and we spend more time with that person, the top grading interview comes back in. And when we understand why they've made decisions, and their description of managers, and what they've thought about the company and their manager and the other people on the team, we hear about why they made decisions, and we hear them reflect on mistakes they've made and either take responsibility for those mistakes and say, you know what, I should have done that differently back then. And in fact, I have done that differently, and they can prove it with examples. They've done that differently since. Or they say, you know what, it was my manager's fault. Or, you know what, I was on a team with a bunch of C players and I couldn't help it. Those are the things that help us determine integrity and team player and such. So unfortunately, there's not a real way to screen that, with a personality test or whatnot. There's too much variability in those. We really need to spend time with that person and hear their story in a structured way, and then we'll get to hear examples of them behaving with integrity and behaving as a good team player or not.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Chris, do startups require a kind of a document which has a kind of a very briefly written hiring strategy so that people can follow it? Or do you suggest that?
So, but would you re-ask that? I'm not quite sure I understand exactly the question.
I mean, see, all we understand is obviously any organization is people, isn't it? So 70 to 80% of your problem is solved if you get right people hired.
Mm-hmm.
So do startups require to write a proper hiring strategy based on the kind of startup we are, the kind of products and services we are, the kind of marketing strategy we have? Deriving from that, do we have to write a specific hiring strategy? And if yes, do you have some kind of examples?
Yeah. So, in simple, I think is strategy perhaps, process absolutely. So one of the things that we find, and one of the like overarching or broad problems in hiring, is that in most organizations the hiring process is nowhere near as tight or defined as other processes in the business. And simply, you just said, 70 or 80% of the company's success is determined by the people who are in it. There's a pretty large disconnect there. So if all you get out of this conversation is we need a structured hiring process and we need to hold everyone accountable, including myself accountable. I need to hold myself accountable for following this process. You'll almost certainly hire better. Now, when it comes to strategy, there are some things such as compensation. Compensation strategy. So where are we going to pay? How are we going to entice the A players at the level we need them to join us? Because if you're trying to get, and I'll bring the compensation levels down just a little bit. Let's say you need someone, a developer. You need a developer, and you need someone with the skill the skill where they're probably making $125,000 right now, but you only are paying $50,000, you're never going to find the A player that you need. And so we need to be realistic about this and then say, all right, so here's what we need. Here's how much it's going to cost. And how are we, what is the strategy that we're going to employ to get there? Is it offering a bunch of equity? Is it, maybe breaking that job down into smaller projects? So we're just buying small chunks of that person's time at a time. So yes, absolutely process. Yes, for hiring and, strategy. And I think the strategic piece also comes in to where are we looking for these people? How are we looking for them? Everyone, I'll say posting job ads and hoping an A player reads it and then submits their resume is not a strategy. That would be like playing the lottery a retirement strategy. Not a very good strategy. There's too much luck involved there. Your strategy needs to involve things like, when we have an opening, I'm going to create this job scorecard, and then I'm going to show that job scorecard to all of the A players I know in my network and ask them if they know anyone who may fit this profile. That's a strategy. Developing relationships with professors who teach the subject that you may need, engineers or accountants or whatever they may be. Developing relationships with them and getting recommendations for maybe interns you'd like to hire. It's another great way to try people out is to hire them as interns and give them a meaningful project. You can also do that relatively inexpensively. You get to try someone out. So those kinds of strategies or strategic thinking, yes, and then have a process to follow to hire.
Yeah, I love it. It's great advice. And I completely concur to you about doing the job scorecard first. I think one of the worst mistakes people make is, we need X position. It really does need to be written out. What are the roles, responsibilities, and the expectation first? Because I feel like, then we don't get clouded. Our judgment doesn't get clouded because we just like someone, or it was a referral or a relative, or who knows what. But that completely subjective approach, I agree with. One thing I just want to add on is really like tapping into the team, not just one person doing the interview or just one person authoring, inking the job description. Get other people involved because, we're all coming from different places, whether it be personally motivated or for the company. Other people can see things that maybe you didn't think of. They're working in different areas of the company. They might they believe there's other priorities. It actually is also a good occasion to kind of bring the decision making team into alignment, right? Because then those hard conversations, Chris, happen. Like, how much is this position really worth to us? What is really needed? Who are they really reporting to? Like, it really, forces the decision making team to be on the same page, is also what I found. And people can vary. You think you're in alignment, and then it comes to hiring, for example, another senior executive. You'll really quickly figure out what other people's kind of beliefs are. Curious about your thoughts, Chris.
Michelle, I agree with it 100%. 100%. And, one of the things I spend a lot of my time doing is actually helping clients create job scorecards. And we strongly recommend what you just recommended, and that is not only doing that job scorecard or creating it with the hiring manager, but also bringing in one or two or three others who are familiar with the position. And what we find, I won't say 100% of the time, but very often, is everyone has a little different perspective about what that role is, and what that role should really be accountable for, and then what those targets should be. There's almost always significant discussion and debate around all of those things. And if that weren't done, everyone would go into the hiring process with a little bit different idea, or maybe even a significantly different idea of what a player is for that role. And I strongly agree that in the hiring process and interacting with applicants and candidates when they get farther down the line, including others on the team is strongly recommended. Two heads or three heads are definitely better than one.
All right, excellent. Thank you. We have three other people on the stage. I want to make sure we give an opportunity to ask Chris, our expert here on hiring great people. And I would say it's even more than that, Chris, right? It's hiring great people and keeping them and helping them excel in their workplace. So I want to jump over to Gary, and then we'll get to you, Nasser and Daniel. So, Gary, your question for Chris or your experience, please.
Hi, thanks for the invite and the opportunity to speak on the stage. A great topic, and I really love what you said just now. It's not only about the policy to hire, it's also about the ability to keep the right human resources within the organization. What I want to contribute to the process is that very often we find that many organizations in the hiring process, the recruitment, the selection, the placement, they focus a whole lot on their personal outcome, the corporate outcome. And I do believe that there is a missing link. And the missing link, you hinted on it. It's important for you to also take into consideration what the human resources that you're attracting to the organization, what are their needs, and how to ensure that that gap can be bridged. So I think it has everything now to do with corporate culture. The corporate culture has to perhaps expand beyond just looking at hiring the right people to drive corporate success and enhance business potential to cash flow. But I do believe in the interest of attracting the right people and ensuring that you have loyalty in terms of the workforce um, with optimum performance. We corporate culture should now take a look at how to bridge the gap with the corporate needs and the expectation of the workforce. That's just my brief contribution on the topic.
All right, Chris, we'll let you comment on that, please.
Michelle, I don't have much more to say than Gary. I agree. And it's something, and it's really twofold. One, we should be thinking about, based on our interactions with that candidate, doing our best to analyze and think about what they really need and what they really expect. And I also strongly suggest just flat out asking them, what are your short-term career goals? What are your longer-term career goals? What are some of the characteristics of the next, kind of perfect job for you, or a next great fit job? What does it need to have, or what does it absolutely not need, can't it have to be a good fit for you? Because, if you hire someone who is an A player and they can do the job and they're talented, they might not be an A player for you. So, yeah, and, thinking about, all right, so what do we need to do to our culture, if anything, to make it attractive for the kind of A players we need, make those changes. Like make those changes and work hard to change your culture. And also be mindful if you like the culture you have, do your best to understand if that candidate also is kind of motivated and excited about the culture that you have and the job opportunities. Some of you who are growing quickly will have lots of opportunities for people to move up and around in the organization. And if you're not growing quickly, you may be hiring people who are going to be in a spot for some number of years because, there just isn't going to be anywhere else for them to go. And it's better to understand that up front, their expectations and their career goals up front and their aspirations, understand that up front before you bring them on and realize there's a mismatch.
Excellent advice. All right. Nasir, what is your question for Chris today? Nasir. Nasir, you're on mute. I don't know. There you are. Thank you. Go
Hi
for it.
everyone. Yeah, I totally agree with Chris, but sometimes it depends if you have the knowledge of your business or no, because we have different industries. If you're hiring for a pizza shop, is different than if you're a small corporate, or if you're a big company. Well, you can't afford like someone who has achieved and who is successful and they have something. You have to start like small and grow with them. Once you have enough resources, then you can hire someone based on their knowledge and their successes.
Yeah, and I
So
think, yeah, go ahead, Nasir.
yeah, so I think with hiring, that's the most important thing for any company or organization or a small business. And unfortunately, most of the people, they don't have the knowledge. For example, if someone has like a small store, a small business, they're not 100% sure about their business. They don't know like everything about their business. And they are hiring someone based on, most of the time I have seen people based on their like, they don't hire someone based on their knowledge and how good they are and their background. So instead they hire someone like a friend or someone recommended, or that's why they end up like in 6 months they're not in the same job anymore. So it's like a complicated process, but some people know it, some people think it's easy, but I think it's one of the most important thing for any business to achieve success is to have a good employee.
And Nasir, like, and I think I'm going to agree with you if I'm hearing, kind of paraphrasing what you're saying is, hiring is really hard.
Yes.
And I completely agree. I don't know that there's anything that's more challenging for any leader, whether it's a startup leader or it's the leader of a Fortune 500 company. Figuring out if that person is going to fit and accurately predicting that is probably the most challenging thing any manager can do. And so you are going to make mistakes. They're inevitable. Like, I'm an expert in this and I make mistakes from time to time. And it's because we're still talking about people, and there's so many variables that are dependent on so many variables in your business. And what we're working to do is de-risk this as much as possible. Expecting perfection is an unrealistic expectation. However, settling with the typical hiring success rate we see, and we define success as filling an open position with an A player. When we begin working with companies who don't use any of the solutions we have to some of these problems, when they come to us, we say, all right, so how often do you get an A player in an open position when you hire? And the average answer is 25% of the time. So, 1 out of 4 new hires turn out to be A players. And I'll tell you, you all can do much better than that. You're not going to get to 100%, but you don't have to accept 25% success. You can do much better than that.
Well, It depends on the company. If you're an established company and you have resources and connection with lots of people in your industry, it's sometimes it's easy to hire someone professional because you know their achievements, you know their backgrounds, and you know what they have done and what they are capable of. But for startup companies, you can't afford those people. So you have to work, you have to know your business well enough to train someone. If someone you hire and they don't have the capability of running your business your way, you have to be a master of your own business to train them and to keep them on track.
All right. Thank you, Nasir, for sharing that. I just want to add on something quickly, and then we'll go to Daniel. We didn't forget you. But don't forget you're on Startup Club. You can go to www.startup.club to join our email list, as well as listen and read hundreds of free sessions. It's all for free, and we do it for the members because we want to help you on your journey with your business. So we're here every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget to follow us and mark your calendar. So, Daniel, it's all up to you now. We're at 3:01 before we end our hour. Daniel, what is your question for Chris? He is an expert in hiring great people. So, Daniel, what is your question, please?
First of all, I would like to thank you guys for giving me a voice here in this stage or in this platform. So, my main question is, so I've been recently beginning my career path in recruiting. So, just to mention a point that Gary mentioned, as well as also Chris, in terms of employee loyalty and Chris's point of short-term and long-term goals. Realistically speaking, hiring or recruitment has become more of a lying game, based on my understanding, of course. So I feel like the victor is the better liar in terms of hiring. So I just wanted to know what are ways that we could properly identify red flags in certain candidates and try to properly understand or to confirm continuity and loyalty in terms of hiring. Because, like, recently we have been employing people who have been leaving a month or 2 months after intense training and loss of resources, and then afterwards ended up with nothing. So I just wanted to know what are certain red flags that I could pay attention to in terms of hiring the proper candidate.
Yeah, Daniel, two pieces of advice there, and one is look at their historical job tenure. You know, if they've moved jobs every 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, or even every 9 months, they're going to almost certainly be a short termer for you as well. And so, I'd suggest actually using that as a screening criteria when you're looking at someone's resume. What's their average job tenure over the past 5 years? Yeah, if it's less than a year, I'd suggest moving on to the next person. And I know that that's going to eliminate many of the applicants, but you've experienced what happens, when you hire those people who tend to have a short-term career history. The other thing strongly recommend doing is, to two parts of this. One, it's to get people to be more open and transparent during interviews, and the other is to verify what you've heard, and you do that by letting people know very early in the hiring process that you are going to ask them to arrange reference calls with managers they've reported to recently. And so those people who don't want you talking to their managers because their managers may not have a lot of good things to say about them will quietly drop out of the process, and that's just fine. For those who remain in, you can count on their answers to your questions and the information they provide you being more open and transparent and frankly honest. And then you then ask them to arrange those calls for you right before a job offer, and then you can verify all the things that you've heard. So those are the recommendations there.
Thank you so much.
Well, I
For
can't say how
Michelle, if
thankful we
you,
are.
oh,
Oh,
we all
sorry,
started
Olivia.
talking
Go
at the
ahead.
same
Go
time.
ahead, Olivia.
No, I just wanted to add that it also may be important to listen to what these people are looking for to understand why they're jumping from job to job. It could be that it's necessary to also adjust certain things, policies at work or structures to be a better fit for them and wanting, like, helping them want to stay. Like, it's a two-way street, and listening to them and what they're looking for, it could be as important as going through the screening process to understand their past and their history to hire better.
But
Hey,
this
am I
is there
ever
a
ever
way?
Colin and Michelle and Olivia? I apologize. I need to jump. In fact, I have a top grading interview that was supposed to start 4 minutes ago, and so I apologize to chat and run, but I need to get to talk to this candidate.
Well, very
Absolutely.
good. I'll close it out here, Chris. Thank you very much. Just want to really appreciate it. I know that using top grading can really help employers make better hiring decisions and lead to better employee engagement and retention. We really appreciate this. Thanks for going over time, and hopefully we'll have you back on the platform when they sort out some of their bugs here. But thank
Hey,
you very much.
happy to be here today, and happy to come back anytime. Thanks, everyone.
All right, well, bye for now.
Thank you
All right,
so
bye
much.
bye.
And thank you for all the members that have attended and the folks that have come up here on stage. We really appreciate your contribution. We do it all for you. And we're looking forward to seeing you again next week on Serial Entrepreneur at 2 p.m. on Friday. Have a wonderful week and be safe. Thank you so much.